The press room was crowded, the hum of whispers bouncing between the walls as journalists shuffled their papers and adjusted their microphones, waiting for their turn to question the president. Cameras clicked, lights flashed, and then the question came, direct and sharp, slicing through the air heavier than any other that morning. A reporter, her voice steady but filled with an ache that carried generations of pain, asked the president, "Why are Black Americans still being killed by police?" For a moment the room went silent, as if the weight of the question sucked all the oxygen away, leaving only anticipation and the pounding of hearts that knew the truth behind her words. In that silence were names that still echoed across cities: George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Philando Castile, Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, names that had become more than names, but symbols of lives cut short and a nation fractured. All eyes turned toward the podium. Donald Trump shifted, his face unreadable, his mouth tightening before he finally spoke. His words came out not as an acknowledgement of grief or injustice, but as a dismissal, a deflection, a denial of the systemic wound that lay at the heart of America. He said that white people are killed by police too, that the problem was not about race but about law and order, as if centuries of oppression could be brushed aside with a few sentences, as if the pain of millions could be flattened into a statistic that stripped away history, dignity, and truth. Murmurs ran through the room, some stunned, some furious, others scribbling quickly, knowing the statement would ripple far beyond those walls. Outside the White House gates, beyond the manicured lawns and polished podiums, there were mothers grieving their sons, fathers mourning their daughters, children asking why their parents never came home. For them, the question was not political, not rhetorical, not an opportunity for debate. It was a question of survival, of humanity, of justice still denied. The president's words felt like a slap, a reminder that the highest office in the land could still look away from the reality that every Black family carried. To understand why that moment mattered, why it stung so deeply, one had to look back, past the flashing cameras, past the politics, into the long road that brought Black America to that very question. The history of Black life in America is written in chapters of struggle, resilience, and betrayal. From the chains of slavery to the broken promises of Reconstruction, from the Jim Crow laws that carve inequality into the law books to the civil rights movement that marched against dogs, fire hoses, and hatred, Black Americans had carried the weight of injustice longer than any president's term, longer than any press conference. Policing itself was born from slave patrols, men who hunted the enslaved who dared to seek freedom. And though uniforms and titles changed, the shadow of that origin never disappeared. Decade after decade, Black communities found themselves over-policed, criminalized, treated as suspects before citizens, feared before respected. The question asked in that room was not simply about recent tragedies, but about centuries of a pattern that left bodies on streets and families in mourning. Trump's answer did not address that legacy. It erased it, tried to flatten it, tried to pretend that the scales of justice had ever been equal. But the truth was louder than politics. The truth was in the protests that filled the streets, in the chants of no justice, no peace, in the murals painted on crumbling walls, in the voices of young people who refused to be silent. The truth was in the footage caught on cell phones, raw and undeniable, showing the brutality that could no longer be hidden behind reports and press statements. Each video, each story tore away the veil of excuses. Each name remembered was a demand that America face itself. And yet in that moment, with the world watching, the president chose deflection over compassion, denial over accountability. For the families watching at home, the words confirmed what they had feared all along, that their pain was invisible, that their cries for justice were whispers in the wind to those in power. Still, even as disappointment spread, something else stirred in the hearts of many. It was anger, yes, but also determination. The same determination that fueled marches across Selma's Bridge, that filled churches with songs of hope during the darkest nights, that lifted fists high in defiance and pride. If the president would not answer truthfully, then the people would. They would answer by speaking louder, by organizing stronger, by refusing to let the narrative of denial define their reality. And so the question echoed beyond that room, through television screens, across social media feeds, into classrooms and workplaces, into the hearts of those who could not ignore it any longer. Why are Black Americans still being killed by police? The answer was written in history, in policy, in the very fabric of a system built on inequality. Trump's words may have tried to cover that truth, but truth has a way of breaking through, rising like water through cracks in stone, unstoppable, undeniable. For every dismissal, there were scholars writing, activists marching, families testifying, communities lifting each other. For every attempt to silence, there was a chorus rising louder. That press room moment became more than a soundbite. It became a reminder, a rallying cry, a turning point for those who refused to be erased. And so the story continues, because one answer, one dismissal, cannot erase centuries of struggle or the fire of a people determined to live free, respected, and whole. Outside the walls of power, the streets told a different story, one written not with speeches, but with footsteps pounding against pavement, with signs lifted high, with chants that cut through the air like thunder. Across the country, people gathered, not only Black voices, but allies of every background, drawn by the urgency of the question that had been dismissed, the question that would not go away. In Minneapolis, a mother carried a picture of her son, killed in a traffic stop, her hands trembling as she held it to her chest, tears running down her face not only for her child, but for every child lost to a system that saw their skin as a weapon. In Atlanta, a group of college students locked arms, chanting into the night, their voices raw, their eyes blazing with determination, unwilling to let history repeat itself without a fight. In New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, Washington, the names of the dead were spoken like prayers, each syllable heavy with grief and resistance. The president's words, instead of silencing the movement, had poured fuel onto a fire already burning. His answer became evidence, proof of the very blindness that so many had been trying to expose. It was not just the brutality of individual officers, but the indifference of those in power that carved the wound deeper. For generations, Black parents had rehearsed conversations no parent should have to have, warning their children how to survive an encounter with police, teaching them how to keep their hands visible, how not to reach too quickly, how to say yes, sir, and no, ma'am, how to live through a moment that could turn deadly for no reason at all. And still, even with those lessons, too many never made it home. That truth lived in every march, every sign, every tear shed under the glow of streetlights as protests stretched into the night. Trump's dismissal rang hollow against that reality. The stories kept coming, one after another, each new headline reopening wounds that had never healed. But history also offered another story, one of resistance and transformation. Black communities had always found ways to turn grief into action, pain into power. In the face of lynching, they built schools and businesses. In the face of segregation, they organized boycotts and marches. In the face of indifference, they raised leaders, preachers, poets, singers, and activists who carried the truth into every corner of the nation. This moment was no different. The fire in the streets was not just anger. It was love, fierce love for life, for justice, for dignity. It was the belief that the blood of their ancestors demanded more than silence. And as the protests grew, so did the tension. Police in riot gear lined the streets. Tear gas hung in the air, rubber bullets flew. The same forces being questioned were sent to silence the question, but silence did not come. Even when streets were cleared, voices returned the next day, louder, clearer. The demand was not only for accountability, but for transformation. Why are Black Americans still being killed by police? Because the system was built on inequality, many said. Because the roots of racism were still alive, hidden in policies, in biases, in institutions that pretended neutrality while carrying generations of prejudice. Trump's answer, denying the racial reality, became a symbol of the resistance they were up against. Yet every movement needs its opposition to sharpen its purpose, to remind it why the struggle matters. His dismissal became a rallying cry, proof that the fight was far from over, that the path to justice would not be walked in silence. Families who had lost loved ones stood before cameras, their voices shaking but steady as they told the stories that could not be denied, reminding the nation that behind every statistic was a life full of dreams, laughter, love, and potential. Scholars and historians spoke out, connecting the dots between past and present, refusing to let the nation forget where its wounds began. Young activists organized online, using technology to bypass traditional power, spreading messages across continents, reminding the world that this struggle was not confined to one city or one country, but part of a global cry for justice. In the face of all this, the president's answer seemed smaller and smaller, like a stone thrown into a raging river, quickly swallowed by the current. For the people, the question was never rhetorical. It was a demand, and though leaders might deny it, the truth had already taken root. Conversations sparked in living rooms, classrooms, workplaces. Children asked questions their parents struggled to answer. Allies confronted their own privilege and silence. Change, slow as it often comes, began to stir. Because the question was more than a critique of policing, it was a mirror held up to the soul of a nation. Could America live up to its promise of liberty and justice for all? Or would it continue to choose denial over dignity? That was the real question, hidden inside the reporter's words. Trump's answer had revealed the depth of the problem. The people's response revealed the depth of their resolve. And so the story does not end with that press conference. It continues in every march, every voice raised, every policy challenged, every heart that refuses to grow numb. It continues with the mothers and fathers who turn their grief into advocacy, with the young leaders who organize for a better tomorrow, with the teachers who bring truth into classrooms, with the artists who paint murals of hope on broken walls. It continues because the question will not go away until justice is real, until dignity is honored, until Black life is no longer seen as disposable. One day, perhaps a different leader will be asked the same question, and maybe their answer will carry truth instead of denial, compassion instead of dismissal. But until then, the people carry the answer in their footsteps, in their chants, in their unbreakable spirit. And that spirit, stronger than any deflection, louder than any dismissal, is the story of Black America, wounded but unbroken, silenced but never mute, pressed down but always rising, again and again, demanding not just to live, but to live free, equal, and whole. Don't just watch, stand with us. Subscribe to Black Unity.